The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years before humans learned how to travel between stars. And in all that time, the great alien civilizations had built an empire that stretched across 1,000,000 worlds and 10,000 species. Ambassador Elena Vasquez remembered the day she first saw the council chamber on Axis Prime, a massive station built inside a hollowed moon at the center of known space. And she remembered thinking that humanity had arrived far too late to matter in a universe that had already decided how things would work. She stood now in the observation gallery above the Grand Chamber, watching as representatives from hundreds of alien species took their seats for the morning session. And she could not help but feel very small. The Kathrani delegation flowed into the room like living water, their bodies made of something between liquid and light that shifted colors based on their emotions. And they moved as one mind because their species shared thoughts the way humans shared words. Behind them marched the Vorath, tall insectoid warriors covered in black exoskeletons that clicked against the crystal floor with every step, their compound eyes scanning the room for threats, even in this place of peace. Then came the Meldari, the oldest species in the galaxy, floating on platforms that defied gravity, while tiny machines swarmed around their ancient, withered bodies and kept them alive long past what nature intended. Elena counted 17 founding species who had created this council at the dawn of galactic civilization, and she counted 431 associate members who had joined over the following millennia. And then there was Earth. Humanity had received its invitation to join the Council only 5 years ago, after their first colony ships had accidentally stumbled into Kathrani space and nearly caused an interstellar incident. And the great powers had decided it would be better to bring the newcomers inside the system than to let them cause trouble outside it. "One vote," said James Park, her aide, standing beside her with a tablet full of notes he would never get to use. "They gave us 1 vote out of 12,000, and they expect us to be grateful." Elena did not respond because she was watching the Meldari speaker take her position at the center of the chamber, a being so old that she had personally witnessed the birth of the council and had guided its decisions for longer than human civilization had existed. The speaker's name translated roughly as "she who remembers the first stars." And when she spoke, every being in the chamber fell silent out of respect that bordered on religious awe. "The Council recognizes the continued threat of the hegemony," the speaker announced, her voice carried by translation devices to every ear and mind in the room. "We will hear proposals for response." Elena leaned forward because this was the issue that had dominated galactic politics for 300 years. The unstoppable enemy that had been slowly consuming civilizations at the edge of known space. The Kathrani ambassador rose first, their bodies shifting to deep blues and purples that indicated fear and sorrow. "The outer provinces have fallen," they announced. 4 billion citizens of the Concord are now lost to the hegemony advance, and our fleets have proven unable to stop them. So we propose strategic withdrawal to the Barrier Nebula, where natural defenses may slow their advance. The Vorath delegates stood immediately, their exoskeleton rattling with barely contained anger. "Withdrawal is surrender," they declared. "The Vorath Dominion proposes immediate military response with full fleet deployment to the contested sectors. And we will drive the hegemony back or die with honor in the attempt." "And how many times has military response succeeded?" the Meldari speaker asked, her ancient voice carrying a weight of disappointment that silenced the Vorath delegate. "In 300 years of conflict, the Concord has launched 17 major military campaigns against the hegemony, and 17 times we have failed." The debate continued for hours in patterns that Elena quickly recognized as ancient and unchanging, with some species calling for retreat while others demanded attack, and still others suggesting appeasement or isolation, or a dozen other strategies that had already been tried. and it already failed. She listened, and she learned, and she began to understand something that perhaps the older civilizations had forgotten. They were afraid. Not just cautious or concerned, but genuinely terrified. Of an enemy they did not understand. An enemy that had appeared 3 centuries ago and had been slowly inevitable ever since, consuming worlds and populations without explanation or negotiation. The great civilizations of the galaxy had faced this fear by doing what they knew how to do, by fighting or fleeing or hiding, and none of it had worked. Finally, as the session dragged toward its close with no resolution in sight, the Muldari speaker turned toward the small section of the chamber where Earth's delegation sat. "The newest member has not spoken," she said, and there was something in her voice that might have been curiosity or might have been condescension. "Does humanity wish to contribute to this discussion?" Every eye and sensor and telepathic tendril in the room focused on Ambassador Vasquez, and she could feel the weight of their expectations. They expected nothing from her. They expected the primitive newcomers to sit quietly and learn their place in a galaxy that had been running perfectly well for 12,000 years before humans crawled out of their caves. Elena stood slowly, straightening her formal diplomatic jacket, and she spoke in a voice that carried clearly across the ancient chamber. "I have a question." The silence that followed was profound, because new species did not ask questions in the council chamber, and new species certainly did not interrupt the business of civilizations that had been making decisions since before Earth's sun had finished forming. "You may ask," the speaker said. After a long pause, Elena looked around the room at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, at species that had mastered faster than light travel and artificial intelligence and technologies that humans could barely comprehend. And she asked the simplest question she could think of. "Has anyone ever tried talking to them?" The laughter started slowly and built until the entire chamber rang with it. Hundreds of species expressing their amusement in hundreds of different ways at the naive little human who thought she had discovered something. That 12,000 years of galactic civilization had somehow missed Elena, waited for the laughter to stop. And then she asked again, "Has anyone actually tried talking to the hegemony?" The laughter in the council chamber took a long time to fade, and when it finally did, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was still standing with her question hanging in the air like a challenge that no one wanted to accept. The Vorath delegates spoke first, their clicking mandibles producing sounds that the translator rendered as mockery mixed with disbelief. "The human asks if we have attempted communication," they announced to the chamber. "In 300 years of war, she wonders if perhaps we forgot to say hello." More laughter rippled through the room, but Elena noticed that not everyone was laughing, and she filed that observation away for later. The Keithrani ambassador shifted to colors of patient explanation, the kind of shades they used when speaking to children or to species they considered intellectually limited. "The hegemony does not communicate," they said slowly. "They do not respond to messages or signals or any form of contact we have attempted, and they do not negotiate or discuss or explain. But instead they simply arrive and consume everything in their path before moving on to the next system." "So you have tried to contact them?" Elena pressed. "We have sent 14 diplomatic missions over 3 centuries," the Muldari speaker confirmed. 14 vessels crewed by our finest diplomats and equipped with every known form of communication technology. And 14 times, those vessels were destroyed without response. "What kind of vessels?" The question seemed to confuse the ancient Muldari. "Diplomatic vessels," she repeated. "Armed diplomatic vessels," Elena clarified, "with shields and weapons and military escorts, broadcasting on frequencies that might be interpreted as threatening by a species that does not know your intentions." The chamber grew quiet again, but this time The silence had a different quality. Any vessel sent into hegemony space without weapons would be destroyed instantly, the Vorath delegate said. It would be suicide. Perhaps, Elena agreed. Or perhaps the hegemony has spent 300 years waiting for someone to approach them without weapons drawn. And perhaps they have interpreted every armed vessel as confirmation that this galaxy wants to fight rather than talk. That is absurd speculation from a species that has never encountered the hegemony, the Kathrani ambassador protested. You have no evidence for this theory, and you have no evidence against it, Elena replied calmly. You have assumptions based on 3 centuries of failed approaches, and you have fear that has become so familiar you have forgotten it is fear. But you do not have proof that communication is impossible. She pulled up a holographic display from her tablet, showing a document she had filed with the Council that morning. Earth formally proposes a new approach, she announced. We will send a single vessel into hegemony space, completely unarmed and unshielded, broadcasting a simple message of peaceful greeting on all frequencies. And we will attempt to establish communication with an enemy that this Council has been fighting for 300 years without ever trying to understand. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted objections in 100 languages, while translation devices struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of outrage and disbelief that poured from every corner of the room. The Meldari speaker raised one withered hand, and silence fell immediately. Because even in chaos, the Ancient One commanded respect. Earth's proposal is noted, she said. But such a mission would require Council approval, and Earth possesses only a single vote among 12,000. So this proposal cannot pass. I am not asking for it to pass, Elena said. Not yet anyway, but I am asking for a show of support. A simple indication of how many species in this chamber are willing to consider trying something that has not been tried before. To what purpose? To demonstrate that Earth is not alone in wanting to find a better way. The speaker considered this for a long moment, her ancient eyes studying the human ambassador with an intensity that made Elena feel like her entire species was being weighed and measured. Very well, the speaker said finally. Those who wish to express interest in Earth's proposal may indicate so now, though this is not a binding vote and carries no official weight. Elena held her breath as the first lights began to flicker on the voting consoles around the chamber. The Kathrani delegation did not light their console, and neither did the Vorath. And for a terrible moment, Elena thought she had miscalculated entirely. But then a small delegation from a species she did not recognize activated their light, and then another, and then a dozen more. And slowly the chamber began to fill with the soft glow of species who were tired of fighting and tired of losing and desperate enough to consider that maybe the newest and smallest member of the Council might have seen something they had missed when the count finished. 412 delegations had expressed support. Elena let out her breath slowly. It seems there is interest, the speaker observed. And Elena could not tell if the ancient being was surprised or impressed or simply curious. Then let us be the ones to take the risk, Elena said. Earth will provide the ship and the crew, and we will ask nothing from the Council except permission to try. And if we fail, you will lose nothing but one small vessel and one group of foolish humans who believed that talking was worth attempting. The formal vote came the next day, after hours of debate and argument and procedural challenges that seemed designed to delay the inevitable. When the final count was announced, Earth's single vote had somehow gathered enough support to pass the proposal by a margin of 3. Ambassador Vasquez walked out of the Council chamber that day knowing she had just sent her own people on a mission that would probably kill them all, but she also knew that someone had to try, and if not humanity, then who? The ship they built was called the Messenger of Dawn, And it was the most primitive vessel to ever cross the Barrier Nebula into the space where the hegemony ruled. Captain David Chun stood on the bridge as his crew made final preparations for departure. And he looked around at the 46 men and women who had volunteered to join him on this mission, knowing they would probably never come home. They were scientists and linguists and diplomats and engineers, carefully selected from thousands of applicants who had wanted to be part of humanity's first real contribution to galactic history. And every single one of them understood that they were almost certainly flying to their deaths. The Messenger of Dawn carried no weapons of any kind, not even the small defensive systems that most civilian vessels use for protection against pirates and debris. And she carried no shields because the mission required them to be completely vulnerable. Instead, she carried communication equipment more powerful than anything humanity had ever built, designed to broadcast on every frequency and wavelength that galactic science had ever discovered. And she carried a message that had been carefully crafted to be understood by any form of intelligence. We come in peace. The message said, we wish to understand. We are alone and unarmed. We mean no harm. Simple words that might mean nothing to an enemy that had been destroying civilizations for 300 years. But simple words were all they had. Final systems check complete. Lieutenant Sarah Wong reported from her station. All communication arrays are functioning at full capacity, and the translation matrix is loaded with every known language in the galactic database. Navigation is set for the nearest hegemony-controlled system, Commander Marcus Webb added. Estimated travel time is 47 days at maximum sustainable speed. Captain Chun nodded slowly and turned to face his crew one last time before they crossed the point of no return. I want to say something before we go, he told them. I want you all to really hear it because it might be the most important thing I ever say. The bridge fell silent as every eye turned to their captain. The council gave us this mission because they expect us to fail. Chun continued. They expect us to die out there in the dark. And they expect the hegemony to destroy us, just like they destroyed everyone else who ever tried to make contact. And, honestly, they are probably right. He paused to let those words sink in. But we are not doing this because we expect to succeed. And we are not doing this because Earth ordered us to, or because the Council needs us to prove something. But we are doing this because it is the right thing to do. Chun looked at each of his crew members in turn, seeing the fear they were trying to hide and the determination that burned beneath it. For 300 years, the galaxy has been fighting an enemy they do not understand, and for 300 years, no one has tried to change that. Because everyone assumed it was impossible. But we are humans. And humans have a long history of doing impossible things simply because someone had to try. He smiled despite the weight of what lay ahead. So we are going to fly into hegemony space with nothing but a message and a hope. And we are going to try to talk to the beings that everyone else has given up on. And maybe we will die, but maybe, just maybe, we will find something that changes everything. The crew responded with quiet determination rather than cheers because they understood the gravity of what they were undertaking. And within the hour, the Messenger of Dawn departed from Axis Prime and began its long journey into the unknown. Back on the station, Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the ship disappear into the void and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders like a physical burden. She had sent 47 people on this mission. If they died, their blood would be on her hands. The days that followed were the longest of her life as she waited for news that might never come. Sitting in the observation gallery and watching the long-range sensors for any sign of the Messenger of Dawn, the Council continued its business as usual, debating trade agreements and border disputes while the fate of humanity's boldest gamble played out in the darkness between stars. And Elena hated them a little for their ability to focus on mundane matters while her people flew toward almost certain death on the 20th day. The sensors detected hegemony vessels in the same region as the Messenger of Dawn. They have been spotted, the Vorath delegate announced with something that sounded almost like satisfaction. The hegemony will destroy them now, and this foolish experiment will be over. Elena said nothing because there was nothing to say. But the hours passed, and the Messenger of Dawn kept moving. They are being followed. A Kathrani analyst reported with obvious confusion. Hegemony vessels are matching course and speed with the human ship, but they are not attacking. They are playing with their prey, the Vorath suggested. Studying the vessel before destruction. Perhaps, Elena said quietly. Or perhaps they are curious about a ship that comes to them without weapons. More days passed, and still the Messenger of Dawn survived, moving deeper into hegemony space than any council vessel had ever traveled, broadcasting its message of peace over and over while the enemy ships followed at a distance, like wolves circling something they did not understand. On the 53rd day, Captain Chun sent his final transmission before entering the hegemony's central system. We have arrived at what appears to be their homeworld. His voice crackled through speakers across Axis Prime. Hegemony vessels are guiding us toward a massive structure in orbit around the fourth planet, and they have made no hostile moves. So we are proceeding as planned. A pause filled with static and the weight of history. If you do not hear from us within 30 days, tell our families we loved them, and tell the Council that we tried. And tell Earth that we were proud to represent humanity among the stars. The channel went silent. Ambassador Vasquez did not sleep. For the next 29 days, she could not eat more than a few bites at a time, and she could not focus on anything except the sensors. That showed nothing but empty space. Where the Messenger of Dawn had disappeared, the great civilizations of the Council watched with her, their ancient patience finally cracking under the strain of waiting. And for the first time in centuries, the entire galaxy held its breath together on the 29th day. A signal burst out of hegemony space with enough power to reach every receiver in known space. Simultaneously, it was a human voice. "This is Captain David Chun of the Messenger of Dawn," the voice said. And Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she listened. "I am speaking to you from the hegemony homeworld, and I need you to hear what I am about to say." A pause that seemed to last forever. "They want to talk." The story that Captain David Chun told over the following weeks changed everything that the galaxy believed about its greatest enemy. And it began with a truth so simple and so terrible that the ancient civilizations of the Council could barely comprehend it. The hegemony had not been conquering. They had been running 12,000 years ago. Chun explained via holographic transmission from the hegemony homeworld. This species encountered something at the edge of the galaxy, something that nearly destroyed them completely, and they have been fleeing from it ever since. The council chamber was silent as the captain continued his report, his face tired but filled with a wonder that made him look younger than his years. Every world they have taken, every population they have absorbed, every resource they have consumed was not conquest but survival, not empire but evacuation. And they were not building an army to attack the rest of the galaxy, but rather an ark large enough to carry as many beings as possible away from the thing that was chasing them. The Meldari speaker leaned forward on her floating platform, her ancient eyes wide with something that might have been shock. "What thing?" she demanded. "What could possibly frighten an entire civilization for 12 millennia? Chun's holographic image flickered as he accessed data files that the hegemony had shared with him. "They do not have a name for it," he admitted. "They have been fighting it for so long that names seem pointless. But they have shown me their sensor readings from the edge of explored space. And I have to tell you that I have never seen anything like it." The display shifted to show data that made no scientific sense. Gravitational anomalies that should not exist, energy readings that defied known physics. And behind it all, a darkness so profound that light itself seemed to bend away from it as if afraid. It consumes everything, Chung continued. Stars and planets and civilizations and even the empty space between them. And it has been advancing toward the center of the galaxy for 12,000 years. And the hegemony has been trying to stay ahead of it while gathering enough resources and people to survive when it finally catches up. But they destroyed our diplomats. The Vorath delegate protested. They attacked our worlds and killed our people without warning or mercy. Because you came to them with weapons, Chen replied gently. In their experience, the entity they are fleeing can corrupt and control other species, turning them into puppets that attack on its behalf. And when your armed vessels appeared in their space, they assumed you had already been compromised. He paused to let that sink in. They thought they were protecting the galaxy by destroying potential threats before the corruption could spread. And they had no way to know that you were simply afraid of them the same way they were afraid of you. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the observation gallery, listening to every word. And she felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. Washing over her, she had been right. That the hegemony could be reached through communication. But she had never imagined that the truth behind their actions would be so tragic. For 300 years, she said slowly, we have been fighting the only people who were trying to save us from something far worse. Yes, Chun confirmed. And the hegemony leadership has asked me to express their profound regret for the lives lost due to this misunderstanding. Because they never wanted to harm the civilizations of the Concord. But they did not know how to make contact without being attacked. And they did not believe that anyone would listen, even if they tried. Why did they listen to you? The Kathrani ambassador asked. What made the human approach different from all the others? Chun smiled at this question because he had asked the same thing. You came without weapons. He explained. For the first time in 3 centuries, a vessel approached them with nothing but a message of peace and a willingness to be vulnerable. And that vulnerability told them something that no amount of firepower could have communicated. What did it tell them? That we trusted them enough to put our lives in their hands, and that we believed they were capable of choosing not to destroy us. And that is something they had never experienced from any other species in this galaxy. The chamber erupted into dozens of simultaneous conversations as the delegates tried to process this revelation. But the Meldari speaker raised her hand and silence fell immediately. What do they want from us now? She asked. They want help, Chun said simply. They want all eyes in the fight against the darkness that has been chasing them for 12,000 years. And they want the chance to explain themselves to the civilizations they have harmed. And they want to know if there is any possibility of forgiveness for the things they have done. And they asked humanity to speak for them. They asked me specifically, Chun admitted. Because I was the one who thought to ask them what was wrong instead of assuming they were evil. And they believe that a species capable of that kind of empathy might be able to help other civilizations understand their perspective. Ambassador Vasquez felt the weight of history settling onto her shoulders as she realized what this meant. Earth had been given 1 vote on the council. A meaningless gesture of inclusion that no one expected to matter. And now that single vote had opened a door that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. The council must decide, the Meldari speaker announced, whether to accept the hegemony's request for dialogue, and whether to investigate their claims about the threat they describe. With respect, Elena interrupted. I believe the council has already decided, because 412 delegations supported our mission. And those same delegations supported the idea that communication was worth attempting. And I do not think they will turn away now that communication has succeeded. The speaker studied the human ambassador for a long moment. You may be right, she admitted. But the formal vote must still be taken, and there will be those who cannot forgive 3 centuries of war, regardless of the reasons behind it. Then we will have to convince them. Elena replied. one vote at a time if necessary, because that is what humanity does best. The formal debate lasted for 3 weeks as delegations argued about trust and justice and the practical implications of allying with a former enemy against a threat that most species still doubted existed. But in the end, the vote was not even close. The galaxy chose hope over fear, and Earth's single vote was counted among the majority. The day the hegemony formally joined the Galactic Concord was the most important day in 12,000 years of galactic history. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of it all. She watched from the podium as the hegemony's representative entered the Grand Chamber for the first time. And she was struck by how different the being looked from the monsters that galactic propaganda had depicted. For 3 centuries, the hegemony were not the terrifying predators that legends described, but rather beings that looked almost fragile, with large eyes that seemed to hold infinite sadness, and limbs that moved with careful hesitation as if they expected to be attacked at any moment. They had spent 12,000 years being feared and hated. They had forgotten what it felt like to be welcomed. The representative approached the podium where Elena stood, and for a moment the entire chamber held its breath as 2 species that should have been enemies faced each other in the heart of galactic civilization. On behalf of the hegemony, the being said in a voice that the translators rendered as soft and weary, "I wish to express gratitude that cannot be measured in words, because you have given us something we lost so long ago that we had forgotten it existed." "What did we give you?" Elena asked. "Hope," the hegemony representative replied. "Hope that we are not alone. Hope that the darkness can be stopped. And hope that the universe contains species capable of seeing past fear to find understanding." Elena felt tears threatening to fall, but she held them back because this moment required strength rather than sentiment. "Humanity is honored to stand with the hegemony," she said formally, "and we look forward to building a future together that neither of our species could have imagined alone." The representative took their seat among the council delegations. The first time in 300 years that a hegemony being had sat in peace among the civilizations of the Concord. And Elena turned to address the assembled representatives. 12,000 years ago, she began. This council was founded on a simple principle that strength determines voice. And for 12 millennia, that principle has guided galactic civilization through countless challenges and conflicts. She paused to look around the chamber at the hundreds of species watching her. Earth was given 1 vote when we joined this council 5 years ago. 1 voice among 12,000. And we were told in every way that mattered that our opinions did not count, and our perspectives were not valuable because we were too young and too primitive to understand how the universe really worked. The chamber was utterly silent, but sometimes it takes someone young to ask the questions that the old have forgotten how to ask. And sometimes it takes someone primitive to see the simple solutions that advanced civilizations have overlooked. And sometimes, just sometimes, a single vote is enough to change everything. She gestured toward the hegemony representative. For 3 centuries, this council fought an enemy without ever trying to understand them. And for 3 centuries, the hegemony fought a threat without ever trying to ask for help. And both sides suffered because neither had the courage to be vulnerable enough to reach out first. Elena smiled slightly. Humanity has always been good at being vulnerable, because we spent most of our history as prey animals on a dangerous planet. And we learned very early that survival depends on cooperation more than strength, and that understanding your enemies is often more valuable than defeating them. She looked directly at the Maldari speaker, the ancient being who had witnessed the birth of the council and had guided it. For 12,000 years, you gave us 1 vote because you did not believe we mattered. And you were right that 1 vote is almost nothing in the mathematics of galactic politics. But you forgot that votes are not just numbers. because votes represent perspectives and ideas and the willingness to try things that have never been tried before. The speaker inclined her ancient head in acknowledgement. Earth used its one vote to ask a question that no one else was willing to ask. And that question led to a conversation that no one else was willing to have. And that conversation revealed a truth that no one else was willing to see. And now the entire galaxy stands on the edge of a new era because 47 humans were brave enough to fly into the darkness with nothing but hope. Elena paused to compose herself because what she was about to say was the most important part. The threat that the hegemony has been fleeing is real. And it is coming, and it will reach this region of space within the next century if current projections are correct. And when it arrives, it will not care about the political divisions or ancient grudges that have shaped galactic history, because it will consume everything equally. She let those words hang in the air, but for the first time in 12,000 years, we have a chance to face that threat together, not as competing civilizations, but as a united galaxy. Not as enemies forced into alliance, but as partners who have chosen to trust each other. And that chance exists because one small species with one meaningless vote decided to try something different. Elena straightened her shoulders and spoke her final words. Earth will always be a minor power in galactic politics. And humanity will always be younger and smaller and less advanced than the great civilizations that built this council. But we will also always be the species that proved a fundamental truth that the galaxy had forgotten. What truth? The military speaker asked. That the most powerful weapon in the universe is not a fleet or a technology or an army, but simply the willingness to ask a question and the courage to listen to the answer. The chamber erupted into something that the translators struggled to render. Not quite applause and not quite cheering, but the sound of hundreds of species, realizing simultaneously that they had underestimated the strange little beings from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star in the years that followed, as the combined civilizations of the galaxy began preparing for the darkness at the edge of everything. Historians would mark this moment as the turning point when fear gave way to hope and isolation gave way to unity. Earth's seat on the council remained small and their vote remained singular. But their voice had changed the course of galactic history in ways that no one could have predicted. And when the darkness finally came, it did not find a galaxy divided by suspicion and paralyzed by fear. It found a galaxy that had learned to ask questions instead of shooting. First, a galaxy that had learned to listen before judging, a galaxy that had learned from humanity, and that made all the difference. The end.